He's Bobby Merritt, General Manager of Nevada Wolfpack Football. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. Bobby, thanks for joining us. I appreciate you carving out some time, especially in a busy time of year and a transitional time of year for a lot of people.
Thanks for having me, John and Pat. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get started here. You've been a personnel executive at some of the highest levels. You've been a general manager in the CFL. You're a longtime NFL scout. You're now a general manager at the collegiate level. If you could, talk to us about your career journey and maybe when you knew that you wanted to be involved with football personnel.
Well, when I began the journey of going to school and playing, when I got done, at the time I always wanted to work for the FBI. And before I went in the military, I coached at my high school just because I really wanted something to do, and I was done playing, and that changed my whole trajectory. From that point on, I knew I wanted to work in football, specifically coaching. So I went and I served in the Air Force. I coached high school football for 2 years. Then I was a graduate assistant. My first college job was at the University of Toledo with Gary Pinkel. Shout out to Coach Pinkel. And from there, it was a couple Division II schools in Ohio, Findlay, Tiffin. I was at New Jersey City University in Jersey City. In 2003, while I was at Tiffin, I met some people with the Lions. My old college coach from Adrian College was a scout with the Dolphins. He connected me to some people, and I had the chance to go work for the Lions in 2003. And really, at that point, I didn't know what personnel entailed. I got into football to coach and really be around young people and compete still. So once I got into personnel, it really opened my eyes to really the bigger picture, the 30,000-foot view of constructing a football team and putting together the various pieces. So I kind of fell in love with it. But I always felt like my background growing up as a coach, specifically from high school and small college, it made me a better personnel guy. It helped me connect with coaches and gathering information. And I always appreciated the bigger picture that I think personnel gives you. Whereas like when I spent most of my time coaching linebackers, you kind of get maybe a little bit of a narrow perspective with your 8 or 10 position guys, and being in personnel really taught me all the various pieces and the cliche of not necessarily finding the best guys, but the right guys for your organization. So as I dove deeper into personnel, I think I grew a greater appreciation in the impact that it really has on a program.
I want to talk some about your NFL experiences, Lions and Houston Texans as well. But I also want to jump around a little bit. And so as backdrop to that, now that you are a college football general manager, and again, you've been at Rice, you've been at Texas, you've been at Tennessee, you're now the general manager for the Nevada Wolfpack. He's Bobby Merritt. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. Bobby, what do you feel like is the biggest help for you or the biggest asset for you on a day in, day out basis as a college football general manager that you took specifically from your time in the NFL?
Not only the NFL, but I think even going back to, like I mentioned, coaching and also being in the CFL, ultimately it's the various degrees of skill sets that I've been able to build upon along those different stops, from teaching to seeing the big picture as a scout, to interviewing coaches and players and gathering background, to being in the CFL and being involved in roster, salary cap management, contract negotiations. I think all those pieces, developing a broad array of skill sets, it has more than prepared me for the college football landscape with all the moving pieces.
That's a really good point. Jumping back to the NFL, story I know because I've known you for a few years now is you were heavily involved in the Houston Texans drafting of J.J. Watt. He became a franchise icon, not just a cornerstone, but an icon. He's a Hall of Famer. What do you remember about that process? Maybe when you first went to scout J.J. Watt, what do you remember seeing about him that made you say, this guy's completely different?
He's relentless. Probably in college, I think I saw him as like an above average athlete, but the way he competed, the way he finished plays, he got so much production late in games and impacted games late at crucial moments because he was relentless. And the way he worked, let's say he was an above average athlete, arguable. He worked himself into being a very good athlete, like just getting a little bit better each year, each off season. So one word, remembering him, relentlessness.
So as you were with the Lions and the Texans and you saw hundreds, if not thousands of guys every year, how many times did you come across a JJ Watt type, just from a motor standpoint, just from a relentlessness standpoint, and just from some of the intangible characteristics that he possessed?
Probably never.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so if you look at different degrees of like competitiveness or effort, right? You can be a war daddy, you can be a seeker of action, you can be a competitor, you can be a coaster, you can be a loafer. Okay. And usually, like, if somebody's a really good competitor or like a seeker of action, they have moments of war daddy effort. This freaking guy was just a war daddy. Like, I really don't. I don't think. I'm thinking Khalil Mack played hard. He played hard, but it was just nonstop with JJ. But not only that, that whole team with the Texans, like D'Amico Ryans, we had guys, Antonio Smith, like that, and they just kind of, they grew off of each other, and they got each other better. And when the effort's rewarded, it's just it kind of materializes and just keeps coming out. And when your best player is amongst your best players are your greatest workers, then you have something.
Again, he is Nevada Wolfpack General Manager Bobby Merritt. This is the Our Coaching Network podcast. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. You're one of the expert talent evaluators. You've been kind enough to have about a decade-long friendship with me, and I learned football from being around you. So I want to ask you right now, when you're turning on now at the college level, when you're turning on a prospect tape, either of a guy in the portal or a guy at the high school level, what are some of the first things that you're looking for, and what are differentiators to you that maybe don't that the average person might not see when they flip on film?
Well, I don't. I think I don't rush to make an opinion. Like, I don't think it's any one thing. I think the key component is letting the player tell you the story of who he is. It's sort of like reading a book. You can read chapter 1, you can read chapter 5, you can read chapter 15, and kind of maybe know what the book is about, but it's not going to tell its true story unless you read multiple chapters in back to back, right? Like, I think it's the same thing with the player. You can't. I think so many mistakes are made because guys want to rush into making an opinion instead of just letting the person tell you who he is. I will say this: like, think about, there is a filtering system, right? Like, okay, if you don't have a certain amount of size, okay, that's going to be an issue, right? Then from there, like, you have to have a certain amount of athletic ability. You have to have a certain amount of play speed, of strength, right? Of football instinct, a certain amount of toughness or competitiveness. And as that filter, like an oil filter, gets narrower, like, as you watch the player, you are kind of filtering through those physical aspects of him. Is he big enough? Is he athletic enough? Is he fast enough? Is he strong enough? Is he tough enough? Is he competitive enough? Does he have enough football instinct to project value, and what kind of value at the next level, right? Then from there, you get into is he a good teammate? Does he love football? Does he have football intelligence? And so it sort of encompasses a big picture.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, you'll drill all the way down. I think you told me at one point in time that if you're watching a running back, you'll see how often he voluntarily goes out of bounds rather than getting contact for the next 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Not because he needs to get out of bounds because of the clock, but you're watching him. Does he compete through the play? What are some examples of that?
Right.
maybe dive in a little bit more on how you look at ball carriers, but what are some other positions and the intangibles that you look for?
Sure. So to your point, like I talked about these like core factors that really apply to every player, right? Size, length, athletic ability, play speed, play strength, toughs, competes, instinct. Then like you're talking about, you're getting into like position specific factors. But your point with the running back, that is to really evaluate his competitiveness and toughness. So say we're talking about a running back that we're projecting, okay, he's not a starter level guy, but maybe he's a good backup. Well, now, okay, if you see him only as a backup, how competitive is he? Because he's going to have to contribute on special teams. Generally, guys that lack toughness and competitiveness are not good special teams players. So that's why, in that case, that the example that you gave, you're trying to formulate an opinion, an educated opinion on what the complete player is. And if his value is not a number one running back, maybe it's a number two or number three running back, then the next question is, what is he going to do for you on special teams? Okay.
How have you seen, specifically at the college level, because it is now maybe 11 years ago that I met you, 2014 or so, sometime around that time that I met you. How have you seen the college game evolve and change the most over the past decade?
Well, NIL collective,
Yeah,
the
sure.
oncoming revenue share, of course. You have created more variables to an already very fluid process in college recruiting. I think it has called for a need for people with bigger perspective. So I think the biggest change, I think, is the need for people with experience in roster construction, not roster management. Like, I know your wife, Jess, my wife, Kavita. They can do roster management. There's 85 scholarships. 4 go to a quarterback, 6 go to a running back, 10 go to a wide receiver. It's a numbers game. And everybody wants to talk about roster management, and you have to manage it. But the roster construction piece is what moves the needle on your football teams. Like, not only the strengths and deficiencies on your football team, but the specific strengths and deficiencies within each individual position group and how you're diversifying each group. You can't have a room full of wide receivers that are all 6'3", 215 pounds, strong at the catch point, win 50-50 balls. You got to have some guys that might be smaller, but are really good getting in and out of cuts and really good at separating versus man coverage and creating with the ball in their hands. Like, a roster management person is not going to find those deficiencies within a specific position group.
And yeah, along those lines, again, this is the Our Coaching Network podcast. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com, joined today by Nevada General Manager Bobby Merritt, longtime NFL scout and personnel veteran, SEC experience, been at the University of Texas. But right now, I want to ask you about your time with Edmonton, the CFL franchise, and you were assistant GM, ascended to the title of acting GM for quite a long time. How much, in hindsight now, because you had roster constraints, you could only have so many foreign-born players on your Edmonton roster, how much maybe are some of those components, while they're not exactly the same, how much do they help you now in roster assembly and roster construction at the collegiate level?
I think it has made me comfortable dealing with more variables. Whereas, like, you're always thinking about, oh, he's a great player, but we have too many Americans now. Like, we're going to have to cut an American. Like, you have to start 7 Canadians offensively and defensively. Like, you have to be aware of that. Sometimes you get into a discussion where, let me word this right. You may have to cut one American at a certain position because the Canadian is a better player than a certain Canadian at another position. Like, so maybe you're cutting an American wide receiver to keep this Canadian wide receiver, even though American guy's a better player. But you're trying to get the better Canadian, so you're cutting the Canadian offensive lineman that might be a little better player than the American, but you want to get the better Canadian.
Right.
So you have to make decisions like that in building your roster. Not only that, these guys managing the salary cap, these guys, they get, of course, a roster bonus like NFL guys, some performance-based incentives, but also like a housing stipend, right? Like, so that's formulated into the salary cap. We had a 1-game and a 6-game injury in the CFL. So if you put a guy in the 1-game injury list, he may be out for 4 weeks, but those 4 weeks you have to count him and track him as part of your cap, even though you may bring up another player because he's out. If he goes on the 6th game, now he doesn't count against the cap. So you bring somebody up, you bring somebody down. Then if you decide, well, he's healthy, I want to bring that guy back after 4 weeks, now you are penalized for those previous 4 weeks, and his salary would count against the cap. So those moving pieces, I think, have created a little bit of a comfort zone for me in handling those variables.
Yeah, I think that there's some commonalities there. It's almost some of those variables are much like your work in recent years in helping allocate 85 scholarships, and now we're looking at scholarships potentially increasing and a roster cap at 105 players, as opposed to roughly 120 that a lot of teams carry, including walk-ons. What do you think are the positives and maybe the negatives to that? I know there's a lot of concern. I live in South Bend now, so the walk-on program as South Bend was famous long before Rudy, and I see it bearing fruit for Notre Dame this past year as Notre Dame advanced to the college football playoff championship. So what do you think are some of the pros and cons of this new proposal for a 105-person hard cap roster, and being able to scholarship up to 105, although I'm not yet aware of any programs fully planning to fund that next 20 scholarships?
Right. And also you're going to be able to do scholarship reconstruction where, partial scholarships are going to be in play.
Oh.
Yeah. So
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that is a strong possibility once the revenue share comes out. So a team that might use 85 scholarships, they may reduce the bottom 10, 15, or 20 to redistribute elsewhere. Okay. I think going from 120 to 105 is just a way of reducing cost ultimately. And that's now, right, if people actually give 105 scholarships, you're not reducing cost. I think some of the cons are there are less people in your program, guys that just want to be a part of your program and really let you practice without any with little management, like you have to manage an NFL roster where you only have 65 players out there, counting the practice squad guys. Having 120, it's really easy to practice. Going to 105 will be an adjustment. I think cost effectiveness, it is, the cost of like teams that are able to feed their guys, with nutrition, that's somewhere between $10,000 or $15,000 a year per person.
Okay.
Okay, and then like the equipment to dress a guy, that's equipment refurbishing. That might be $6,000. So you're talking about roughly a cost of $20,000 per player to be in your program, right? So, do the math. If you're reducing from 120 to 105, that's quite a savings on every university. Again, unless you decide all of a sudden you're going to have 20 more scholarships.
Yeah.
Which I don't think, like you said, most people are not going to do.
Yeah, just the quick math, and I'm terrible at math, but to your point, 20,000 by 15 players, that's 300 grand in savings right off the top there.
Right.
And like I said, you've been at Tennessee, you've been at the University of Texas. When you factor in scholarships and equipment and clothing and housing allowance, like, do you know a ballpark figure of what a line item cost is per player, per scholarship player on an 85-man roster, or roughly what it was when you were at Texas?
Man, I want to say it depends if you're in state or out of state. I want to say an in-state scholarship at Texas was around 35,000. Out of state was 50 or 55. Okay. That's tuition, fees,
Right.
costs, living stipend, cost of attendance, right?
Okay.
So let's say an in-state kid is $35,000, then it's another roughly $15,000 feeding him, right?
Yeah.
So it's now you're up to 50,000, and then the equipment, you're a $55,000-$60,000 investment for
Yeah.
one in-state player. Does that
Per
answer
year.
your question?
Yeah, that does. That
Yeah.
does. And as we talk about Texas, again, Nevada Wolfpack General Manager Bobby Merritt. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com on the Our Coaching Network podcast. At Texas, you work with Jeff Choate. Now he's your head coach at Nevada. What did you see in coach at Texas that let you know he's a guy you could kind of tie your career to right now, that you had that belief in?
Comfortable in his own skin.
Yeah, and I mean, he had a tremendous first year impact in Nevada, really close to some breakthrough wins. Had a playoff team in SMU on the ropes right off the bat to start the season. So, what were the moments at Texas? Because I've talked about it with you. You're a guy I've said I could work with. So, what were the moments at Texas where you were like, I could work with Coach Choate down the road?
Yeah, comfortable in his own skin, authentic, big picture guy. Like we immediately kind of dove into like just philosophical conversations, and I think him being a head coach at Montana State for I think 5 years, and then going, I don't want to say back, but going back to being a position coach, co-defensive coordinator, like he already had that like 30,000-foot view. So I think we sort of gravitated to each other, especially him being at Montana State. Like they had to, dive into players and study players. They just weren't having really, really good players fall into their lap, right? Like I love my time at Texas. They're great. Coach Sark is great to work for. But Texas, it's also Texas is a 5-star place, right? That now Sark has built a good culture, and it's I don't want to say easy, but 5-star players kind of fall into your lap at Texas. Okay, it's got that brand, right? Similar to Notre Dame, Ohio State, right? Well, Coach Choate at Montana State, you got to dig through the weeds a little bit to find, sort of a 5-star guy that's really a 1 or 2-star guy. Right. So, he was always really intrigued and interested in my personnel background. So it just kind of sparked different conversation, and we challenge one another with certain topics and conversation. And but those 3 things again, John, like being comfortable in your own skin, being authentic, and understanding the big picture. Those 3 things are the things that come to mind.
Montana State is a 5-star. It's located in a 5-star college town. Shout out Bozeman, one of the hidden gems. If you haven't been to Bozeman for a game day or anything like that, then you're missing out. It's an underrated, underappreciated college atmosphere. It's great. So you just referenced Coach Sark. What would you say from your time at Texas is the biggest thing that you maybe brought with you to Nevada that you picked up from Coach Sark or from that organization in general?
I think Sark's probably, well, look at, besides the whole play calling thing, like that's just not a thing that people talk about. Like it's unbelievable. Like I think you and I could run routes and we'd be freaking wide open the way he designed things. But really, I think he's sort of a master of organizational structure and vision. Like very organized. Like the schedule is the schedule. And that's what really makes him so easy to work for. Like what's expected. His organizational skills and presenting a structure and a vision are really good. It makes it easy to work for him.
Yeah, and kids love consistency. So
Yes.
not only do the adults and the coaches and the staff
Right.
want to know, but
Right.
the kids really thrive in an environment where they know what's expected day in and day out.
And he was also like the demand. You're at Texas, like you are competing for a national championship every day. Like that has to be the effort, but he's also very aware of like life outside of football. Like he took care of you also.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, we try not to on each of these. We try not to only talk ball, even though anytime I get a guest like you, I'm trying to become a sponge and soak up as much knowledge as possible. But I want to ask a couple of fun questions here. All right, so
All right.
you've been an NFL scout for whatever, a dozen years or something. I can't remember exactly, but you're on the road a ton. I think maybe at one point you told me 180, 190 nights a year as an NFL scout. What are a couple of your worst ever travel experiences as an NFL scout?
Well, I got to say this. The most of my 11 of my 12 years, I scouted the Midwest, right? So, like, schools are close to each other. It's not like if you're scouting out West, you get done at a school and you're freaking 8 hours away from the next stop, right? Like, it's not like that. Um, Gosh, you know what? Probably snowstorm in Connecticut in November was a
Oh,
little
okay.
dicey. I was like in stores and going to like, where was I heading? Back down south towards like, or I was in stores going to Boston College maybe. Like, so that was a little dicey, like with snow. I was in Minneapolis shortly after the bridge collapsed. Like I had gone over that bridge. Remember that?
Oh, okay.
Do you,
Yeah.
do you remember that?
Yeah, I
I don't
remember
know if it
that.
was
Yeah.
like 2012 or 10, maybe. That's going back now, but like I had been over that bridge a number of times, and I was there. Like I saw the dang thing laying in the
Oh, wow.
collapse. I
Yeah.
didn't see it collapse, but I was
Right.
there after the fact.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Yeah. That was what, like I-35 or I-90, one of those that
yeah,
one of the
maybe
arteries in the city.
35.
All right. Another fun one here. How many marathons have you now run? What's your favorite and when is your next one?
Okay, I'm around 25.
You're insane.
Marathon, ultra marathon.
Wait,
Um,
ultra marathon. Not everybody. I know because my wife's crazy enough to run marathons and she's got the big Sur coming up. But I'm not sure everyone knows what an ultra marathon is. So stop right
yeah,
there and tell us.
anything beyond marathon distance.
Okay.
The furthest I've gone is a 60K, which is 37 miles.
Okay.
But I've done some 50Ks. I haven't done that 100-mile stuff. Like, I mean, those guys are, they're wired a little differently.
Yeah. That's the
Yeah,
Ragnarok or whatever. Yeah.
my
Ragnarok.
favorite, probably my favorite experience. I did New York City. Like, that's awesome. It's unbelievable. Logistically, it's a little bit of a nightmare, but so I gotta say, I mean, New York City is probably the coolest. The Philadelphia Marathon's pretty awesome.
Oh, yeah. A lot of history there. Yeah.
Yes.
So what's your next one? Are you training for one or do you have one on the horizon?
I don't right now. If I probably Houston in 26, maybe 27, but I stay in enough. I keep my fitness level enough to where like I could go do a half a marathon tomorrow. Like, so then like I'm fit enough where I could start training to do a marathon. I just haven't committed to doing one right now. Being back in college football, like the day to day, it's a little different. Like when I was scouting, I was essentially just about home every other weekend during the season, so I could always get a long run in.
Yeah.
So that kind of kept a base where I could do marathons. Now it's a little different.
Okay. All right. Well, those were a couple of enlightening ones. I'll close it up with this again. Really appreciate Bobby Merritt, General Manager of the Nevada Wolfpack, joining us today. And I'm John Brice on the Our Coaching Network podcast. Of course, I'm with FootballScoop.com. We've talked this whole time about personnel, about roster management, construction, the changes in the game. What do you see? Like, we're seeing the marketplace explode for general managers in college football right now. Chad Bowden just got a 4-year deal at the University of Southern Cal, which completely reset the market. What do you see as the future for GMs in college football? And without sounding like you're full of pride, how important is that position, do you think, moving forward?
I think that there is a gap in college football that's separating elite teams from good teams or great teams, good teams from great teams. And that gap can be addressed by the people that are willing to identify the right leader for those roles to help in roster construction, and not only roster construction, but the leadership with off-field staff. Like, people aren't talking about that enough. the professional maturity and professional competency to not only manage things but lead people off the field and take that off of a head coach's plate in college football. I think the people that do the better job of identifying leaders in those general manager type roles are going to close the gap on teams that are, say winning 10 or 11 games. And if you're a team winning 8 or 9 games, I think there's a gap there that can be addressed by identifying the right person to help construct rosters and lead off-field staff.
Really insightful, great wisdom. Appreciate you joining us today again. Special thanks to Bobby Merritt, Nevada General Manager. And this has been the Our Coaching Network podcast. Bobby, you're welcome back anytime. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good talking to you guys. I appreciate you, John. Appreciate what you guys do for the game.
Thanks
You
a lot
connect us
again.
all to the fans, man.
Yeah, we love it. So this has been the Our Coaching Network podcast for Bobby Merritt. I'm John Brice of FootballScoop.com. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Okay, take care. Thanks, guys. Bye.